We are Si and Sophie. This is Coastal News, a home and away podcast, your weekly episode companion podcast for your favourite Aussie soap.
Okay, so this week we're talking about Ray Meagher, my personal hero.
Not Ray Meagher.
Not Ray. Oh, yeah. It was a shock when I realised how you pronounce that. I will be honest. I can't remember when I learned it. It was a long time ago. But when I first heard him introduced on something, they said Ray Meagher. I was like, oh, I've been saying it all wrong because I'd only seen it written down up until then. But I think I did used to say Ray Meagher. Ray Meagher. Yeah. Anyway, Ray Meagher, lovely Alf Stewart. So this week, both of us have watched the episode that's gone out in Australia on Channel 7. This Is Your Life. You know, we used to have this here, didn't we? I don't think it's on anymore. This Is Your Life, is it?
No, it's not been on for a while.
It's not been on for ages, but we did have this program in the UK. And they do This Is Your Life, and you get presented with this big red book, which was like meant to represent all the sort of big chapters of your life. And then there's this lovely bit on there where they get all your friends and family in a TV studio, and they talk about you, and it's all very nice. So we watched the Australian version of this program, This Is Your Life, and this week the subject of the program was the lovely Ray. So it was lovely, wasn't it? So it started off, for anybody that hasn't seen it, because like I say, it was broadcast in Australia, but you can actually get a copy of it on YouTube. Somebody has uploaded it. I don't know how long it will be on there for, because these things tend to get taken down, don't they? But somebody's ripped it and put it on YouTube. If anybody wants to go and watch it, it is on there. But it's lovely. So we're going to talk you through what happened in the TV show. So in the opening scenes of the show, we see lots of gorgeous shots of what we know as Summer Bay, don't we? We see Palm Beach.
Yeah.
We see the lighthouse and lots of aerial shots, like very similar to what we see in the show normally in the week. And then we also see the presenter, who Ray kept calling her Mel, so I'm presuming she's Mel somebody. I don't actually know her name. I didn't reckon. It's obviously famous in Australia, but I didn't know her from Adam. I don't know whether you did. No, didn't know her. But Ray kept calling her Mel, so I'm going to call her Mel. So we see her. She's on a speedboat. She's jetting over to Summer Bay. She's talking about who's going to get this accolade, this Is Your Life accolade. We see her rock up in the diner, and we see Alf filming a scene with Rue, don't we? And she walks in.
Oh, I loved this bit.
It was awesome, wasn't it? Because you kind of see behind the scenes. That was really cool, because I don't know whether it's a normal day, but it looked like there was a lot of people in that diner watching that scene. Did you notice? Yeah. I don't know if it's because they'd all turned up because they knew that Ray was going to get a surprise, or whether there really is that many people watching a scene being filmed. I don't know, but I love that, like seeing, like, you know, the film, the scene being shot and seeing it from like the director's point of view, I guess, from behind
Where's
the camera.
The wall?
It's amazing. I love stuff like that. So Mel rocks up, and she's turned up with the red book, and Ray just takes one look at it, doesn't he? And he's like, he can't keep his eyes off this book. He knows what it is, and he just goes, "You're kidding me! You're kidding me!" And then she's like, "Are you okay?" And he looks completely overwhelmed, doesn't he? Looks completely shell-shocked. And he's just looking at this book, and he goes, "Oh, I hate to think what you've got in there, but I guess we'll have to find out." Which I thought was really sweet.
Do you know what as well? I bet, because it's Ray, I bet not a lot gets past him on the set. So I bet he was shocked that it was something he didn't know about. Yeah,
that's true. I bet he's got his fingers in all the pies. He knows everything that's going on normally. So to keep that quiet from him, which he obviously had done, because I think it was genuine shock on his face. He wasn't acting.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
His acting's not that good. No, sorry. Cut that out.
Really? Don't you talk about my hero like that. So she basically just sort of says, you know, Ray's been on the show as Alf, or Mr. Stewart to you, for the last 34 years. And it's about bloody time, really, that he got, you know, some recognition for that. So that's the setup for the whole show, really. And then we cut away from the filming scene in the diner, and we're now in a TV studio, aren't we? So it's filmed in front of a live studio audience, and we get to see some of them. So the camera kind of like pans over the audience, doesn't it? We see some familiar faces. It looks like there's a lot of former cast members there, but there's a lot of current cast members there. Like we see Lynn, who plays Irene, and we see Shane, who plays John, and a few others sitting in the audience. And then we see, I presume, Ray's family and friends sitting there too. And then we see Ray walk out into the studio. So there's a live band playing. I had to Google the song they were playing because I was interested in the lyrics, because I was like, what is this? It's Bruno Mars. I didn't know the song. It was called Treasure. And the lyrics that we heard went, treasure, that is what you are. You're my golden star. You make my wish come true if you let me treasure you. And I couldn't not hear the lyrics when they were playing out, because I was like, this is so cheesy, but I love it. It's like treasure. I loved it. I thought it was proper.
Oh, I didn't even notice the song. So
didn't you notice?
It's nice that you noticed that. Yeah,
watch
I didn't even
again.
notice.
He sort of walks out and just goes, treasure, that is what you are. I was like, my little heartstring went ping. It was cute. And then we see everyone in the live audience are standing up. They're clapping on their feet, giving him a standing ovation as he comes in, and sits on this like a chaise longue thing, isn't it, in the middle of the studio opposite the presenter.
On the chaise long.
All the songs today, listeners.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's cool. And then Mel, I think her name is, she just looks at him. She goes, are you okay? And he's like, it's pretty overwhelming. And I just thought, oh, bless him. He did look genuinely overwhelmed. There was quite a few I don't know whether you sort of saw it, but there's quite a few moments where it looked to me like he was trying not to cry. Did you notice that?
Yeah, do you know, it was most obvious when Kate Ritchie just spoke, and it just the thought of him seeing her, he just immediately welled up, didn't he?
I know. I could see, because every time we weren't on him, and we could see him in the corner. They put like a little square in the corner with his reaction in when we were watching video clips or something. And I kept looking at the little square and seeing his face, and he did look like he was biting his bottom lip and like trying not to get emotional. And I was like, oh, bless him.
That's when I think I said to you, wasn't it? This feels very like he's hanging the hat up.
I know.
You know,
it does feel like it's a saying goodbye, retiring, and bowing out thing. I don't know. I suppose
it's because it was retrospective. It was looking at his life, and But it did fit. Yeah, you're right. His emotion was surfaced.
It was
quite often. Yeah.
So we start off the show, and the presenter starts by saying, okay, you were born in Roma in Queensland, which was, when you were born, it was quite a small place, a few thousand people. And now you are internationally famous. You're a household name. You're recognised all over the world. How did we get here? And that's kind of how it starts, really. We see like a video montage of clips of Ray being introduced in shows across the world. In the UK, in Ireland, we see him on Lorraine, don't we, I think? And on This Morning, like, we see clips of him going on, and we've got Ray Meagher here from Home and Away, just to sort of show us that he is internationally a household name. He is, isn't he? In a lot of places where this show plays out in lots of different countries, not just the UK even. So that's where we start from. And then it kicks off the show, because like ours, a version of This Is Your Life, what they do is they kind of wheel people out that mean something to you, or that played a role in your life, and they come out and they do a little, like, a story about you, don't they, or talk about something that happened. So we kicked off with a fairly big name, which was kind of a shock, but it was somebody that wasn't in the studio. They were actually via video link, and it was Chris Hemsworth that played Kim Hyde, who we now know as Thor, obviously.
Yeah. If you don't know him, where have you been?
Under a rock, somewhere on the moon. So it kicks off with him. It shows us a video. He calls Ray the godfather of Australian television. He calls him a flaming legend and his hero, and it's all very sweet. And he tells a little story about the first time he's about to meet Ray, and he sees him in the corridors at oh God, where am I? The where they film. What's it called? The location where they film. He sees him in the corridors, and he's about to go up to
Channel
him, isn't
7
he?
Studios
Channel 7.
or whatever.
Yes, the studios. That was, I couldn't think of the word studio.
Yeah.
He's about to go up to him and be like, "Oh, Ray, it's me, Chris. Nice to meet you." But he ducks out, doesn't he? He says he lost his nerve completely and went and just dived into the costume department and went and hid himself and tried to get his composure back. And he said in the meantime, it was actually Ray that came up to him and introduced himself and said, "Oh, it's lovely to meet you, Chris. You're going to be great here." And it sounds like a lot of these stories are quite similar, aren't they? The day that they met Ray, everyone's saying how sort of intimidated they were by the idea of meeting him, because he is just the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Stewart, isn't he? And it must be quite intimidating to have to front up to him on your first day as an actor on Home and Away. But all the stories are they're very similar, that he's actually lovely. He's very down to earth. He takes time out to go up and talk to people, and he's really positive by the sounds of things, and supportive and that kind of thing. So, and then what I thought was interesting with Chris was he ended it by saying, like, "You're a dear friend and I love you," which I thought was really sweet. And actually Ray looked quite choked up by that as well.
Yeah, he did. And it shows you that he's not just someone who hangs about with the oldies, you know. He really makes a difference to the young cast lives when they come onto this show, you know. A lot of these actors are fresh out of school, but I mean, a lot of the stories were quite similar. Oh, this was my first job and I turned up and you were there. At the same time, I know you say, like, he was really warm and everyone loves him and he seems to make all these bonds with everybody. But I got the sense as well that despite all that, he seemed to give off to them a sense of authority and but not in like I don't mean that in like a negative way. I mean, like, they knew he was the legend TV. And like, and they knew that he was the guy to please, and that he actually, you can imagine that, but beneath the exterior there's a little soft man who makes friends with everyone. You know what I mean? He obviously gives off this aura of expectation in the workplace, but he gains everybody's sort of undying respect as a result of it,
He's not standoffish, is he? Because, like you say, it can be very easy to be like, "Well, I'm the famous one, I run the show, I'm the big I am," and treat the young guns with a bit of disdain and like, you've not been born yet, that kind of thing. And it sounds like he's not like that. He gets the respect because of who he is and because of his career, but actually he's also supportive, approachable. Everybody
he's got a lot of time.
Everybody that they interviewed used the word relaxed. I don't know if you noticed. I nearly counted how many times people said relaxed because they kept saying it. It was, he was really relaxed and calm. And I was like,
I wonder if
really
that is because, do people get a job on there and go there expecting him to be Alf, who isn't very relaxed, is he?
That's true.
It's that is really, like you say, interesting, because your perception of a character on TV and you think that person as a result. And I wonder if that's why he makes such a mark on people, because he's different to what they expect. That's really interesting.
I think that might be it, because that was one of the words that I kept hearing was relaxed, and I was like, God, they've said pretty much everybody's used that same adjective to describe him. And also the amount of people that said he likes having a laugh, like he's always telling jokes and he's always pulling pranks and stuff. So that was interesting as well. So
did you see the VT from Steve Peacock? And he said he's a man who takes his, and I thought, oh God, because Alf famously kicked off about the Braxtons, you know that, don't you? Oh God, what's he doing? And he said, I like he's a man who is very serious about his work, but doesn't take himself seriously at the same time. And I thought, can't ask for any better than that, can you?
Yeah, that's a really nice thing to say, isn't it? Really, about your colleague, that is a really lovely thing to say, and it's a really lovely thing to be to work with someone like that. So it was a love fest, really. So Chris Hemsworth came first, then we saw Katie Ritchie. So the presenter, we heard a voice, didn't we? I think he said, oh, I know what she said. She said, "You'll always be Mr. Stewart to me."
Oh,
I think everybody that would watch the show in 2008 knows who that was.
Yeah, and my bottom lip went right away. I was like, oh, because I could see he was cracking. He was trying not to cry, and I thought, she's only said a few words. She's not even come out yet. I thought,
no, I know, it was literally that. You will always be Mr. Stewart to me, because that's meant to be like a clue as to who's coming out if you don't already recognise their voice or whatever. But that was a line, wasn't it, from their last scene? So when Sally left in 2008, they had this gorgeous scene, didn't they? Sally and Mr. Stewart on the beach.
Yeah.
And he says to her, doesn't he? No, she says to him, "I'm going to miss you the most, Mr. Stewart." And he says something like, "Oh, just call me Alf. Just this once, just call me Alf." And she goes, "Oh, you'll always be Mr. Stewart to me, Alf."
And the line was repeated by little Pip when she come back. Do you remember?
Oh yes, I do.
And they did the same scene on the beach, but Pippa was with them.
Yeah.
And he says the same thing, doesn't he? And Pippa says, "Oh, you're Mr. Stewart to us," or something.
Yeah.
The same line was echoed. You know, it was repeated, and I thought it's quite cute. I think Sally and Alf represent, because again, it's another example of a character you've invested in, and because she was only a child herself, we've grown with. So I feel like Sally, she's a tad older than me, very similar age to you.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like one of your mates, you know, like so you don't. She said, didn't she, when she was talking about him? When I watched that scene on the beach, I don't see. I do connect with Sally and Alf, but I don't see Sally and Alf saying bye to each other. I see two friends, and I think when we watch the show, we also see it. Yeah. And I think because we've got that investment into them just as much as they have.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so emotive.
Yeah, it is, definitely. It's like we're watching our friends. They're watching themselves be friends on the beach having a chat rather than the characters, and we're watching friends that we've known for 30 years, aren't we, really? So
yeah.
It's weird.
And there's one thing Home and Away does to me that other soaps and dramas can't, and that is tap into my emotions so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, I can't cry at other soaps. I just don't know what it is, and whether it's my investment in it and my personal, you know, the time and feelings I've put into the show over the years, my attachment to it, whether it's that's just raw, but it's characters like those that epitomize the Home and Away of old that made us feel the way we do about the show.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I think it was one of the soaps I watched as a kid. I don't think I watched like EastEnders I watched EastEnders and Corrie now, but I don't remember watching those when I was growing up. But I definitely watched Home and Away, so I do feel like this is the show that I grew up with. And Alf does feel like my granddad, you know, because I've seen him every day for like the last 30 years. Like, who else can you say that about?
When we say it, we laugh, don't we? But it sounds daft to an outsider. You can't. There's no other way you can sort of say it, is there? You know. But I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
There's not many other people in my life that I've seen every day for 30 years.
I know, and there's no other TV show that's why soap is such an interesting genre, and it'd be a shame if, you know, there's lots of talk about soaps declining and stuff. It'd be a shame if, you know, soap operas went entirely in the future, because there's no other genre of television that can give you that attachment on that scale.
Yeah,
it just
absolutely.
isn't.
Yeah, I agree. End of an era.
God, can you imagine us if it was, you know, like we're talking about Neighbours, you know, we're talking about like Neighbours people being upset earlier this year.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you know, and at some point, you know,
it will
in
happen.
life it will happen, but you can understand the upset, you know.
You can. It's a huge part of your routine, isn't it? For me, it's like I finish work, I go and start the dinner, I watch Home and Away. That's what I do every weekday. It's really weird imagining that not happening. I mean, even the break that we get over Christmas, it throws me entirely.
I know, but look, it goes beyond the break. I mean, we're obsessives, but like you talk about the routine, watching the show every night, but then look what have we done this week? Done nothing but talk about it.
I've been texting you all week. Sorry, work, but yeah, I have.
But you know, so it goes beyond 22 minutes a night.
It does, yeah, it does.
You know, and I think that's something that you don't really appreciate as a non-soap viewer. That these people, why watching this show, this is your life show, and seeing all the oldies come and share their love, just the nostalgia just takes you right back there. You know,
it does, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then talking of nostalgia, literally the next thing that happened, because while Katie is still on the sofa next to Ray, the presenter sort of directs our eyes to the doors where Ray had come in to the TV set, and it's projecting like a film, and it's the opening credits from the original run of Home and Away in January 1988. And I at this point I was like, this is a bit weird. Why are we watching the opening credits? Like the whole opening credits. It was lovely to see, but I thought it was a bit strange. Like we saw the famous seagull. You remember the seagull that was in the first ever opening credit scene? I used to love that seagull. And then we saw the original Fletchers, because the whole first series and the pilot was about the Fletchers, wasn't it? It was about Tom and Pippa and their brood of children. Carly, Lynn, Sally, Frank, Stephen was one of them as well. It was all about them. So we saw all of these characters in that opening credit scene, and then because it had been shot across this door, the door kind of rolled back, and then the Fletchers arrived, didn't they? So then we see those characters as those actors as they are now. So we saw Pippa, Tom, Carly, and Frank. I know, and I was squinting. I was like, oh my god, they look so old. I think the original Pippa, she was recognizable. I genuinely saw her face was still the same. Her hair was different, but her face was still the same. Frank, I could tell when I really looked at him, but at first look I was like, who's that man? And then I realized it was Frank. But Tom and Carly, I wouldn't have known them if I'd walked past them in the street.
I was like, oh my god, Carly's had a bad paper round. I thought, jeez, that or I am old. And then
that was
Tom, I only knew it was Tom because his mannerisms.
Yes.
You know, you recognise the way.
Yeah, I recognise his smile.
That was the only way. And Frank, do you know Frank? I say recently, but it's 5 years ago now. Was on that special show they did for the 30th anniversary.
He was, yeah.
Didn't look like that.
No, he didn't. He didn't. His age, doesn't he? It was quite. I could tell it was him, but Tom and Carly, I was like, wow. If they'd walked past me in the street, I wouldn't have recognised them. But yeah, that was. Yeah, a blast from the past, literally. And then we had them for a bit, didn't we? They were cracking jokes, and the Alex that played Frank was telling us about what we've just been talking about, really, about the two sides of Ray. So what he said, he remembered watching Ray becoming Mr. Stewart on set. So he'd do this scene where he was like shouting and angry and like grabbing somebody and throwing them around. And all this sort of stuff, and then the next thing it'd be like end scene, and he'd be like back to Ray, just calm and relaxed and telling jokes. And he said he was really impressed by how I think he said he realized then that he was a real actor, if you know what I mean, because before this, and they talk about it in the show, before Ray got the job on Home and Away, he was a film actor. He'd got an established film career. He'd been in, I think they said 30 movies in 20 years, and they'd been like quite a pioneer of the Australian cinema movement. Some of the films he's been in have been regarded as like the top 5 ever Australian films. So, you know, he wasn't just this, you know, guy off the street. So I think that's a lot of people have said, you know, he's a real actor, and that's why he's so impressive, that you don't normally get that on a soap, do you? So
yeah,
it's usually the way around, isn't it? People go from soaps into films. It's quite rare for them to go from films into soaps.
Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah.
And then so I can't remember what else happened with the Fletchers. Can you? I can't remember what else they talked about now.
No, they just ushered. They did this with a lot of the guests. They ushered them off really fast.
Yeah, they only had like a couple of minutes, didn't they? Which it was pretty quick. But then we had a video of, I think you texted me and said it made you a bit emotional. It was Norman Coburn that played Donald Fisher, Flathead Fisher. He came on and did a little video because they said he couldn't be there in the studio. And he talks about how he met Ray at the auditions, and they shared a dressing room for 16 years, and they had like loads of fun, loads of laughs. Calls him bloody good friend, doesn't he? Says you're a bloody good friend and I miss you. I thought that was very sweet. That was obviously
I did, yeah.
It was in the past tense though. It was like, you were a bloody good friend and I miss you. I was like, oh, I wonder if they're not in touch anymore. Doesn't sound like they are.
But he's in his like 90s.
Is he? Oh, he looked the same. He looked the same to me. He still looked like Donald to me. Gosh, is he? Is he that old?
Yeah. So he's not going to be like tweeting and TikToking, and you know.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Not going to be easily contactable, is he?
And then they rolled out, and the presenter, actually, the words she used for the next guest was, "Please welcome one of your on-screen wives." And I was like, oh God, which one is it? And it was Judy Nunn that played Elsa. And before she came on, they did the voiceover thing, didn't they? And she said, "I've always loved working with you, Ray, and I don't blame you for the death of my character, even if Alf did cause my heart attack." And then because she'd said that, when she came and sat down on the couch next to Ray, the presenter actually said to her, you know, if I had £1 for every time someone said to me, "Did Alf really cause your heart attack?" And she goes, "Oh no, I don't blame him at all. I blame the writers."
She just will not shut up about this.
She's still got a grudge.
She's really not happy, is she?
You told me not that long ago that she's famously always, you know, been outspoken about this, about how she got written out of the show and not been very happy about it. And she obviously still is holding a grudge about it.
Yeah, she didn't like it at all, but like it was 20 odd years ago now.
You think you'd be over it by now, but there we go. But she was good because she gave us some stories about how she said that they were really like a married couple. And also she gave us some insight, and I'd read this online. I think I shared the article with you where the Alphisms that we talk about, you know, Stone the Flaming Crows, Strike Me Roan, Strike Me Pink, all those things, Flaming Galar, they weren't in the original scripts for Home and Away. These are things that Alf brought with him. And she talks about that, doesn't she? How she says he's quite humble about it. But then he tells us the story about how when he was a kid, he knew this guy, must have been a friend of the family, that spoke like this. And he said he was a salesman or something. And he used to come out with these really archaic phrases, and he'd put them all in like the same sentence, like, "Oh, Stone the Flaming Crow, strike me road." And Alf said, "It just made me laugh. I just thought he's so funny." And then he's brought these into the character. So I think that was a nice thing to hear. That was quite a good little story.
And he's made Alf his own, you know.
He has, because that's what Judy says, is basically like Alf has been co-written by Ray. It's not just the writers writing him. He's had so much of a hand in how Alf's turned out as a character.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. So that was nice to hear. What did you make of the poem from Vinny?
Cringe.
I've got it written down if you want me to repeat it.
Go on then.
So the next guest was Ryan Quanton, who has gone on to have a career in America, hasn't he? I don't know what he's been in.
True Blood.
That was it, True Blood. I haven't seen that, but when he was in the show, he played Vinnie Patterson. He was Leah's husband, father of VJ, their son. But he came on and it was just a clip of him reading this poem, wasn't it? And I didn't know what to make of it. So I have written it down because it was so weird. It said, "You've seen all sorts come through Summer Bay. For me, it was Vinny, the V-man, father of VJ. In the scrum, you were the prop, I was the hooker. You taught me that substance was sweeter than sugar, and that to fall on your arse isn't a bad thing. In acting, your flaws and fallacies are king. I have nothing but love for you, dear man, forever your student and your #1 fan. Forever in awe of all that you are. This is your life, Ray Meagher. Just died. I just died. And then it went back to the studio, because this was a video, wasn't it? Went back to the studio and Ray's just there, and he just went, "Oh, he always was a character." It just made me die.
I was thinking, is the poem thing like a thing they had going?
I don't know. There wasn't any depth to it. He didn't really explain it, did he? He just said, "Oh yeah, Ryan was always a character." And he's a bit of a smart aleck. He's always trying to one up me with my puns and my jokes and stuff. So that was bizarre. Then we had a few guests that I kind of wanted to gloss over, because I think I texted you, didn't I? And I was like, some of the guests that they brought on were genuinely, I think, what Ray would have chosen. If you said to Ray, bring on a bunch of people, talk about your time on Home and Away and who meant the most to you, and that and your friends and family of the show, that kind of thing, I think he would have chosen some of the people they brought on. But some of them were, I think, a showcase of the most famous people they could think of that had been on Home and Away.
Yeah.
And the next two I'm not going to talk about too much, because they brought on Beck Hewitt, who played Hayley Lawson, and she just gave us a story about how he helped her with her homework. And then they had a video clip of Danny Minogue, who I call Emma Bloody Jackson, for a year back in like the early 90s, and her video was just like, "Oh, I missed the fun that we had back in the day," and that was it. There was no substance to these stories, because they didn't.
Them two are names that just get wheeled out all the time to the show. Have you noticed? Every year there's a rumor that either one of those two are rejoining. They just coattail all the time, aren't they? Those two.
They are. So I wasn't that interested in them two, but there were a few guests that were rolled out next, which were probably people that I wouldn't have expected. So they talked about, before Ray became an actor, his rugby achievements. So he says himself that he wasn't very naturally gifted at school. He wasn't academically bright, but he did have a talent for sport, and he enjoyed swimming and cricket and athletics. But his biggest thing was rugby, and actually he got very close to being picked for the Wallabies, which is the Australian national team. So that's a really big deal, and it was for the 1969 South Africa trip. But he unfortunately didn't make the team, which would have been like a massive change. Can you imagine if he had? We wouldn't have Alf Stewart now.
Nope.
It's one of those like just juxtaposition, what are those things in Back to the Future? It's like, oh, the timeline, it would have skewed the timeline if he'd got this. If he'd got the shot at being in the Wallabies, he would never have been on Home and Away. We would have had him playing Mr. Stewart, and we wouldn't have this character. As we just said, he's co-wrote Mr. Stewart, so he would, even if the character still existed, it wouldn't be the same character. That's just mad to think about that. But they brought on an ex-Wallabies rugby player called Nick Farr-Jones, who, if you were a rugby fan in the early 90s, you'd know he's a household name from that era. And he talked about when he was actually working as a commentator in the 1999 Rugby World Cup, which was hosted by Wales. And Ray is a big fan of rugby, as well as playing it when he was younger. He also loves watching it. And he was in Chepstow in Wales at the time when the Rugby World Cup was going on. And Nick Farr-Jones was in the same hotel or same restaurant as him, and on a night out. And Nick Farr-Jones back then was pretty famous rugby player. And he saw this group of girls or ladies come into the restaurant, and they all had pens and notebooks and stuff. And he assumed that they were there to meet him, ask him for his autograph. And he kind of stood up to greet them. And he said they walked straight past him and straight over to Ray. And then within half an hour, the whole place was just full of Home and Away fans, all wanting to meet Alf Stewart and have their photo taken with him. And this was a really interesting story, not just to hear that side of things, but also what Nick said. And one of the things he said was he was amazed at that point. He hadn't realised how far a reach Home and Away had.
Yeah.
How globally recognised Ray was, and how much the show boosted the Australian economy from being sold overseas, and I thought that was a really good point that he made about that. It's something that we don't think about that often, is it? We just take it for granted. So that was interesting. And then he talked about his career. So obviously we heard that the rugby thing didn't take off. He didn't get a go on the Wallabies team. Good for us, because we got him in home and away. So I think Mel said to him, like, well, what next then? So the rugby thing went sour. You're not very gifted academically. How did you get into acting? And we heard that he had some friends that had auditioned for a pantomime in a local theatre that's just been opened, and they'd all got parts. And then it got closer to the opening night, and they said to him, right, you've got a part because somebody hasn't shown up or somebody's off sick or something, but we've got you a part in the pantomime. Come along and do it. And he ended up being the back end of a pantomime horse by the sounds of things. That's one of the first things he did in his acting career. So obviously it's taken off from there. That was funny. They showed a picture of the horse. I don't know if it was actually the horse, but in my mind it was. And then at this point they brought on the guy from his childhood friend, Alex Pope, who comes on, who was the one that got him the gig as the back end of this horse. And he's quite interesting. So obviously he's not, as far as I know, he's not famous or anything like that. He's just a regular guy that's obviously still in contact with him, still his childhood friend, because they're ribbing each other the whole time that he's on the couch next to him. So you can tell they're really good friends. They go back a long way.
Yeah, it was obvious, wasn't it?
It was so sweet. And we found out that Ray's nickname is Megs, and apparently there's a comic book character called Ginger Megs, and anybody with red hair got called Megs. So he won't even call him Ray. Well, he calls him Megs the whole time. He's on the couch, like, oh yeah, Meg said this and Meg's done that. And what he said was, we basically reiterated what Ray had already told us, that all his mates were a bit worried about him. He'd not done very well at school. He'd lost his chance to have a career in rugby. He was selling life insurance, and he sold him, I think he said, 3 life insurance policies, trying to get these sold. And they weren't really sure what was gonna happen to him. And then obviously his career took off and exceeded any of their expectations, and he just said how sort of proud they were of him, and that he was such a nice bloke and it couldn't have happened to a better person. So that was like lovely to hear from somebody that knows him, pre being Alf, I guess. And then after that, again, my eyes rolled a bit when they brought a video clip of Julian. I don't know how to say his name. Is it Julian McMahon or Julian McMahon?
Yeah.
Can't remember. Was in it for a hot minute in the 90s. Married Carly Fletcher, and he's now on. Well, he was on. I knew him from Charmed, but he's on Nip Tuck and a few other things, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I kind of glaze over because, again, he's not really not who I would have chosen to be on the show, but he's very, very famous.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like,
he's linked to royalty, isn't he? And also, the Australian Prime Minister.
He's the son of the of an old Prime Minister. Yeah. I wasn't that interested in him. But then they talked about Ray's film career. So they said in the 70s and 80s he appeared in 30 films in 2 decades. They then had a clip of Quentin Tarantino, which was really interesting. He was talking about.
I was well shocked at that. I was
I was shocked. He was talking about a film called The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, which came out in 1978, and Ray had a big part in that. And Quentin Tarantino called it a masterpiece and said it was in the top 5 ever Australian movies made. And we see various other clips. He's been in a film called Breaker Morant in 1980, and some of the ones I hadn't actually heard of any of these, I'll be honest. But the one that I do want to watch is from 1987, and it's called Dark Age. And if I can get a copy of this, I'm going to get one, because it's about a killer crocodile. By the looks of things.
Oh yeah.
And we saw a clip, didn't we? And Ray's character goes, "You give me one good reason why crocodiles should be protected." And then this other character goes, "They're sacred." And then Ray goes, "Sacred? It just ate 3 people." I was like, I need to watch that film. That looks awful. That's my kind of film.
Some big plastic croc.
It was like a huge plastic, like, the shark in Jaws looks tragic. Yeah. It looked like that, didn't it? I thought, yes, I'm gonna download that if I can find it. And then eventually we got onto Home and Away. But But before that, actually, there was a really sad bit where they brought on, do you remember Ray's sister-in-law, Pat? And they brought that bit on because they explained
we learned about his
mum. Oh, it was awful. So they gave us this story about how Ray's mum sadly passed away when he was very young. He was 8 years old. And she went in for like a routine hysterectomy operation and then unfortunately just passed away, never came back again. So he ended up being kind of brought up, I guess, by his older brother Colin and Colin's wife Pat, who became like his new sort of surrogate mum and dad, really. And they brought Pat on because it sounds like sadly his brother Colin has passed away since. But she was lovely. I thought she was really nice. Like she said, he was such a joy. He was such a lovely little boy. And he was hardworking. He was conscientious. He's never asked for anything. We just loved him to pieces. And like it was so lovely to see them together again. Another real person that knows the real Ray and not just Ray at work, I guess, was the nice thing about that. But that was really sad. I didn't know that.
Yeah, his backstory, his childhood was a sad one.
It's quite sad. And then there was some, after the sad bit, there was some really odd stuff next. There was because she said, oh, you did some pantos in the UK, and then they brought up a video of Sue Pollard and Bobby Davro saying hello to him, which was just so bizarre.
Are you shocked?
I know. I was like, what? Where are we going with this? That was bizarre. Out of all the people that he's done panto with, they bring up Sue Pollard and Bobby Davro. Crikey. And then they talked about him taking home the gold Logie in 2010. She didn't actually say what he won it for. That really annoyed me. She just said, oh yeah, you won the gold Logie. She didn't actually say what it was for, or like, I don't know, it was a bit weird. But then he gave us a little backstory on that. So he said, as they announced that he was the winner of the gold Logie, he was sat next to Ada, that plays Leah, and Emily, that plays Marilyn. And in the furore and the happiness of him being, announced as the winner, they sort of grabbed him, but they both had wine glasses and they basically just poured their wine over him. And he said he had to accept the award looking like he'd peed himself.
Yeah. I think Gold is most popular person on TV.
There's a few though, isn't there? There's a couple of gold ones, isn't there? I thought there was a couple of, isn't there like best personality and best presenter or something, or I can't remember.
Well, he'll be actor, won't he?
Yeah.
But I feel like I've watched a lot of these acceptance speeches on YouTube of the Logies, and the year he won gold, because it was the same year. It was like a long time coming, like he'd been nominated every year coming up to it.
Yeah. But they did say that the 2010, when he won the gold Logie, wasn't the highlight of his year that year, because that was also the year that he secretly married his long-term love, Jilly.
Dark horse.
I know. Very dark. And they brought her out. They brought Jilly, his new wife, out. Well, new wife, I guess. 2010. They've been married a long time now. But yeah, they secretly married. And they were talking about how they had a very low-key wedding, didn't they? They just had no guests. They went out for dinner afterwards, and they didn't tell anybody. In fact, a bit later on, they brought out Emily, that plays Marilyn. Do you remember? They brought her out a bit later on. And she says something like, we've known each other so long, we've been through births, deaths and marriages together, apart from yours, because you had a secret one or something. she's not letting that go. Like, you didn't invite me to your wedding, actually, your secret wedding. But yeah, that was nice. Like, they brought they did, like I say, they brought out Ada, that plays Leah, they brought out Emily, that plays Marilyn, and they brought out James, that plays Justin, didn't they, as well? And they just,
some of the current guys, talking about what it's like to work with him, weren't they?
Yeah, they just said that they know each other so well that he knows all their secrets. Ada said that he was the first person she told when she got pregnant, and they just have this really close relationship. And again, it was all the same stuff we'd heard throughout the whole show, how he's really supportive and he's just there for you, and sounds like a lovely person. And I think James was talking about how he was really nervous when he first started. Again, he was like intimidated by this Ray being this man, the myth, the legend, as we said earlier. And his first 2 days were scenes with Alf. Yeah, so he was like, oh my God, I've got scenes
stuck on a boat, he said, didn't
Alf
he?
Stewart, yeah.
I know what scene he's talking about as well, because Alf had that heart stroke or something, didn't he? A heart attack or something.
Yeah, and he was trying to get the, was it the engine had clapped out or something? Yeah. Trying to get him to shore again.
Yeah.
So he was like, oh my God, I've got my first 2 days are with Alf, and it's like a really intense scene, and like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. But he said, and I thought this was really sweet, that his agent or something had sent him this screenshot at the end of the week. So the end of James's first week on the show, he got the screenshot from his agent, and it was a screenshot of a text message from Ray saying whoever hired this bloke did good. And I thought that was really sweet.
Stamped, approved.
Yeah, approved by Ray. What more could you ask for? What more could you ask for? But yeah, it was lovely. There was loads of other stuff that happened. I can't remember who else came out, who else got wheeled out now.
Well, the only thing after that, because I think you've covered everybody there, the only other people I can think is some of the younger, newer cast. So Mac, Emily Weir came out with Tane, and they were just talking same stories, really, just sharing stories about what a kind, giving sort of teddy bear he is.
I remember the story that Ethan told. It was the handshake story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? Ethan said, Ray taught me the value of the handshakes. He said, when I first met Ray on set, I was like really nervous. Like, it doesn't look like a hugger. I think I'll shake his hand. Shook his hand, and got past that first day nerves. And he said on the next day, he went to shake his hand again, and Ray went, no. Like, no, I'm not shaking your hand again. And he says something like, you young fellas, you devalue the meaning of the handshake. You shake hands too often. We'll do one handshake at the start of term, and we'll do one handshake at the end of term. And that was it, really. That was so cute. But they actually did shake hands on the couch then, didn't they?
Yeah, that's what I mean about him probably setting some sort of expectation at work. No wonder they love him, but they're slightly terrified. I like it as well because he said when he walks down the corridor, he heard Ray going, "Are you one of them new Kiwi boys?"
Yeah, and then the All Blacks are good, aren't they? Like, oh, bless him.
It's a gorgeous, gorgeous trip of nostalgia, of nice, kind words, and
lamb cutlets. I forgot the lamb cutlets. One of the last guests on the show was a plate of lamb cutlets. That was so random. Oh,
by the retired resident cook from the studios. Bless us.
I know.
The audience were going mad for her, weren't they, when she came out?
I know.
That's the way to everyone's hearts, through their stomach.
Yeah, through the lamb cutlets. We know what Alf likes now. Mr. Stewart likes his lamb cutlets. So,
and a third artery. Yeah. Go and check it out if you haven't heard it. Thanks so much. I loved that trip back through This Is Your Life. It's such a shame that wasn't on UK TV. Will you share? We'll share the link, won't we?
Yeah.
And we'll put it in this episode description so that you can just click right to it and then come back and hear Sophie's take on it all, because that was really enjoyable. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you for listening. We will be back with more episode discussion from Summer Bay soon. Until then, join the discussion online at Coastal News Pod.